The information provided on this podcast is for general informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your qualified health provider with any questions you may have. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. Reliance on any information provided here is solely at your own risk.
Welcome. This is Birth, Baby. Your hosts are Ciarra Morgan and Samantha Kelly. Ciarra is a birth doula, hypnobirthing educator, and pediatric sleep consultant.
Samantha is a birth doula, childbirth educator, and lactation counselor. Join us as we guide you through your options for your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum journey. Thank you to our listeners for your continued support. If you enjoy our content, please be sure to like, follow, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. This helps us gain visibility to other people that could benefit from listening in. Hello, everyone. Today we have our birth story episode for you, and we have Camry Heckeroth with us today. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me on.
We're excited to hear about you and your birth story. And this is also super cool because you are currently expecting your second baby. And I know you're kind of looking at just a totally different journey this time. So maybe we'll have to have you back in the future to tell your next birth story. But we would like to start by hearing about your first one.
Thank you. Yeah, hopefully not too far in the future. I'm 38 weeks tomorrow.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm sitting here like rocking around on my birth ball.
Yeah, part of me when we scheduled this, I was like, I wonder if she'll have her baby before we do this. It's possible.
It could happen. But honestly, like starting with my first birth, I think that was one of the things that when somebody tells you like, so I gave birth in a birth center, and when they tell you you can have your baby as early as 37 weeks, there's this thing that happens in your brain that says, oh, I will have my baby at 37 weeks. And so every single day after 37 weeks, I was fully prepared to go into labor and disappointed when I was not going into labor. And so I just want to remind anybody that's listening that if you're in that spot, like between 37 weeks and your due date, or between 37 weeks and when your baby's coming, like that is a hard place to be, knowing that it could be today, but it could also be 3 weeks from now.
I tell my clients to lie. I tell my clients to lie about their due date. I'm like, tell people that at your 20-week checkup, they said, oh, actually, we changed your due date, and make it 2 weeks later than it is, because that'll put you at your 42-week mark. And everyone else will think it's 40 weeks, because after 40 weeks, everybody bugs you about it.
Yeah. So, or even leading up to it, even leading up to 40 weeks, people are like, oh, no signs today, and it's you end up having the same conversation over and over and over.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming pregnant with your first baby?
Yes. So I did probably about 3 months of intentional kind of trying to prepare my body for pregnancy before we actually got pregnant. And that just mostly entailed like being really intentional about where I was in my cycle, and some really intentional like supplementation and education, and trying to be as like fit and healthy as I could be going into pregnancy. We were very fortunate. We got pregnant right away. And I had a very easy first, I think, half of my pregnancy. Everything was kind of by the book. I didn't have really bad nausea. I had a lot of food aversions, but other than that, like everything was kind of like, oh, you might get headaches at this week. And then I would get headaches at that week. Everything was like very by the book. So there was nothing that felt super out of the ordinary. And then I got to about right before my third trimester, and it was summer in Texas. And it just felt like I got hit by a Mack truck. Like everything got worse because of the heat. And I was feeling very unlike myself. But honestly, it was a very textbook pregnancy leading up to that point. And then I feel like once you hit the third trimester, you're like, oh, wait, I still have a third left to go. It's not like baby's coming right around the corner. Like we still have a long way.
Yeah. I feel like that like summer pregnancy, I always feel for my clients who are due in like August or September or something, because I've done that twice and it is no joke. It is rough when it's 110 degrees outside and we're like, well, go for a walk. I'm like, no, wait, don't do that.
Don't do that. I was due in September, beginning of September, and we actually found, I was scouring Facebook Marketplace trying to find one of those under the desk walking pads just to have in our house because I could not walk outside. I was such a baby about it. It was like, if I was not in the pool, I did not want to be outside.
Absolutely. So what sort of, outside of finding a walking pad and figuring out exercise and all of that, what did you do to prepare for birth? And how did you go about deciding that you were going to deliver in a birth center? What did that look like?
Yeah, I'm kind of the crunchiest person in my family. I think that if I had told anybody that I was delivering in a hospital, people would have been shocked or thought that something was like horribly wrong. So nobody was really surprised that I was kind of interested in the midwifery model. But leading up to pregnancy and in very early pregnancy, I had started doing my research and reading. I read Ina May's Guide to Childbirth, and I read Real Food for Pregnancy, and just several things that kind of opened my eyes to what the different options were. I also met my doula before I ever got pregnant. She had posted something. I used to live in Ireland. She had posted something about living in Ireland, and I saw that she was a doula in our area. And I reached out to her and I was like, I am not pregnant. Like, I don't know exactly when I'm going to be pregnant, but I would love to meet you and, talk to you about some of this stuff early on. So we actually met 3 or 4 months before I got pregnant, and just kind of hit it off and talked about what the different options were in my area and what birth centers were available, what midwives were available.
You were so prepared. This is wild to me. Like, we don't talk to people that had preparation at all. You're like, made sure that I had supplementation and I was exercising and I was really healthy when I was getting pregnant. And then I actually met my doula before I just, connected with her to find her. Like, that's amazing. You were setting yourself up for success for the start.
I honestly think that there's so much about pregnancy and birth that we can't control, but there is also so much that we can do to set ourselves up for success. And I am a researcher, and I probably have control issues, but those were things that, I said, I knew we're not going to be actually trying yet. And so what can I do in the meantime? So some of it was just for me, and it was like, I wanted to know that I was doing something. But the doula thing, I met my doula, Ciarra, and we just hit it off, and it just happened to be many months before I needed her. So she was actually, on the day that I tested positive, I texted her and I was like, well, you're hired. So,
that's so special.
Yeah. So, I knew her ahead of time, but she was the one who, talked to me about what my options were close by and about the birth center and some other midwives. And at the time my husband and I lived in this teeny tiny little 2-bedroom house. There would not have been physically room probably to have a birth there. And it was just not a good setup for a home birth. And so it wasn't really even something that kind of crossed my mind. And the birth center was so close to our house. We had such a good first meeting there and tour there, that was sort of a no-brainer for us. So that was why we decided on the birth center.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, but having a doula, from day one, honestly, 10 out of 10 was amazing, because any question that I had that came up super, super early in pregnancy, I had somebody to go to. So she was like my Google. I would text her before going to research anything in our area or anything about birth, because I was like, well, let me check with Sarah first. And then if I need to, I'll, go and do further research.
I love that. We tell people all the time, you're going to pay the same amount if you hire us at 26 weeks or if you hire us at 6 weeks. And so you might as well get the most bang for your buck and hire someone earlier on, because especially at the beginning, and especially I think with the first pregnancy, it's you're so excited, but you're kind of just out in the ether, wandering around pregnant. You don't really have a doctor's appointments yet. as most doctors won't see you until you're somewhere between 8 to 12 weeks pregnant, or midwives or whoever. So you're just kind of like wandering around with like no guidance. So I think it can be really nice to have like a person who's like knows you're pregnant and is able to kind of support you in those early days.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And a lot of our clients, their families don't even know when we know.
Yeah.
No, I've said that a million times, but it's like a special little connection with someone where you're getting to confide and like, you got to tell somebody. And then you have that doula that you can tell.
Culturally, we don't tell people until, sort of a certain point, and that certain point is different for everybody. But it's such a, like, I totally understand why people withhold that information, but it's also somewhat, it feels like a disservice to the new mom who is having all of these changes and who has all of these questions, and your brain is just going a million miles a minute. And then every time somebody asks you how you're doing, you're just supposed to fine. So to have a doula to talk to, like have somebody other than just your partner or your immediate family is really, really beneficial, I think, for our mental health. When we are maybe really sick or we have a lot of really weird symptoms that we're not telling people about, like, don't just suffer in silence. Get a doula, get somebody you can talk to.
I love that so much. That's such good advice. So you had a doula, you were doing all these things. Did you do anything, any specific to prepare for the actual like labor and birth or postpartum? What did that look like?
Yeah, so I love chiropractic care. So I had a chiropractor that I had established care with before I got pregnant. I had some like lower back, residual back pain from an injury in high school. And I thought, when I'm ready to give birth to a baby, like my lower back needs to be in perfect shape. And so I had started care about 6 to 8 months before we got pregnant, which was awesome to have that relationship established whenever I did get pregnant. So he was, again, like one of the first people who knew was my chiropractor, because even before we were telling family and friends, I was going to see him. And he's local to our area, and he is Webster certified and specializes in pregnancy and pediatrics. So that was definitely a relationship that I wanted to create. So I got chiropractic every week of my first pregnancy, which was amazing. This time around, I'm going every other week. And I definitely feel a difference. So any chiropractic work, I think, is amazing. But I was really fortunate to be able to go so often with my first. So I did that. And then I had read the author's name is Lily Nichols, The Real Food for Pregnancy. So I was really intentional about nutrition the first time around, which was hard with a lot of food aversions, especially in that first trimester. Hot proteins, like I could not go near them. Anything that was warm and a protein, I just did not sound good.
That's so specific. Warm proteins, opt out.
It was so specific, but I could eat like chicken salad or, like cold ground beef. But if it was warm, nope, it was not good. It was that. So that was hard. But I was really intentional about supplementation and kind of using her food philosophies. And so I felt pretty good, and I felt pretty well nourished. And I was also able to be really active with that first pregnancy, like up until the end, which helped me feel like myself. And then I also took a birth class. So I actually took Sam's birth class. Sam and Ciarra, my doula, did a birth class where part of it was virtual and part of it was in person. And I actually took it kind of on the earlier end. I think I was probably only like 24 weeks when we did the in-person. And I mean, most of the people in the class were in their 30s weeks. And so I was like, just there with my first little like remnants of a baby bump, but the birth class
from
was
everything
amazing.
else you've told us, we're not surprised. You sound so much like me.
It was either I do it really early or I'm like cutting it really close. And so I was like, I don't want to wait until I'm right around the corner. And so my husband and I did that class together. And again, 10 out of 10, I think that everybody should take a birth class. Like there's so much there's so much that, you don't know. And why would you until you get to that season of life? And so that was amazing on top of some of the books that I was reading at the time and some of the research that I was doing on my own.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
So you said that from everywhere from 37 or every day from 37 weeks on, you thought maybe today was the day. How did it lead up to the day? What happened then?
I was still working. My work was so kind and gracious. And when I did get to around that 37 mark, they were kind of like, you can start doing some more work from home, like start taking a step back. But honestly, which at any other point in my pregnancy, I would have been like, yes, absolutely, I'm out of here. But honestly, by that point, I was like, I just need someplace to go every day.
A distraction.
Stir crazy. Yeah. So having the routine helped a lot of just, getting up in the morning and getting ready. And even if I didn't stay for the full workday, I was still like some semblance of routine. And I really did not feel any different up until about 39 weeks. So at 39 weeks and 3 days, I woke up and I felt like that was the first time that it felt like something was sort of changing, and he was born the next morning. So I did not have a lot of lead up of like, wow, I really feel and see all these different signs of labor. It was kind of like something feels like it might be starting to shift. And then I still went to work that day, and then I had him that night. And I can go ahead and like launch into.
Yeah, let's hear it. How did birth go? What did it feel like? What did you do? Let's hear it.
So I remember waking up that morning. Again, I was like 39 weeks and 3 days. And I was like, this is the first time that something feels a little bit different. And I texted my doula and my midwife, and I said, I think I'm seeing like bits of my mucus plug. Again, when would you have ever seen one of those before? So it was very unsure of like, I think this might be, but I feel fine. So I'm going to just go ahead and go to work and go about my day. I knew from like my birth class and from my books that this could be a really, really long process. My best friend had lost 3 mucus plugs before she ever had a baby. And so I was like, well, I don't want to get my hopes up. So I'm just going to pretend like nothing is happening. So I went to work. I started feeling a little bit crampy at work. But again, this was like, I was also 39 weeks pregnant and it was September. So I went home and I rested, and I had remembered my midwife saying, people are mammals. Like our babies come at night. They come in the security of the, like under the moon. And that was always in the back of my head when I was in that like later stage of pregnancy. And I just sort of assumed that he would come at night. We also, we didn't find out the gender ahead of time. So at the time we didn't know what we were getting, which was really fun.
Oh, I'm always so amazed by people that can do that. I'm so type A, I cannot. And you kind of sound type A by everything else you're saying. So I'm very impressed, actually, that you were able to hold out.
Part of it was a desire to control some of the situation, because I had heard that if you don't tell people what you're having, they're more likely to like stick to your registry and like get you things that you need. And I did not like
that is smart.
Yeah. And honestly, it was so true. We had people that said to us at our baby showers, like, well, I would have gotten you something cute, but I didn't know what it was going to be. So I just got you something on your registry.
That's like, a life hack.
We needed bottles and a car seat. Like we did not need the cutesy clothes. We needed all of the like logistic stuff. So anyways, but I knew that we could not keep the secret if we knew and we didn't tell people. And I didn't want to like slip up. So I was like, we're just going to not know. And that was great. It ended up being really sweet for our first. We found out for this time, we are having a boy this time around. And it was also sweet to find out that it was a boy, but it was nice to have like both. We got to experience both ways.
Yeah, for sure.
So I forgot where I was.
That's okay. You're pregnant. You have all the excuses in the world. I'm 7 years postpartum. What's my excuse?
But I lost your plug. You were kind of starting to feel some sort of way.
So I remembered that my midwife had said, like, a lot of times babies come at night. So I sort of like was going to bed that night thinking like maybe something will happen, trying not to get my hopes up. And so I woke up I was like really milking the rest while I could before I had my first. So I was going to bed at like 9. And I woke up at 11:20, and I remember thinking like something feels really intense. And I like immediately recognized that I was having contractions, and they had a very definitive start and stop point, which was the first time that had happened. So up until that point, I was experiencing some random cramping and some random back pain, all of the general like late pregnancy symptoms. But this was the first time that I was like, this has a start and an end, and that's new. And it was intense. So I said, I'm just going to like time a couple, get a baseline, and then I'll decide what to do from there. So I actually had like very, very definitive 1-minute contractions, 7-8 minutes apart, from like the minute that they woke me up. So I texted my midwives, I texted my doula, and I said, this is kind of where I'm at. And I got all these texts back saying, that's great, go back to sleep. And I remember thinking, how does anybody sleep during this? Like, this can't just be me,
I can't wait until you have your next one and you come back, because first baby, it's so hard to ignore anything because you're so stinking excited.
I know, the adrenaline.
Yeah, I remember one of our moms, her water's released at 8:00 at night, and she's like, y'all, my water's released, but I'm not having waves. And we were like, go to sleep. And she's like, well, I know that's what I'm supposed to do, but that's great in theory, but I'm so stinking excited, and even her husband was like, I have the shakes from adrenaline. I'm so excited. And so with that second one, it's like, they wake you up in the middle and you're like, nah, that alarm did not go off yet.
Going back to
I was going to say, and then we have second time moms who they're like, I'm going back to bed. We're like, okay, but they're coming every 5 minutes. Maybe not.
Second mamas are like, I'm going to get as much sleep as I can.
This baby will wait until the morning.
Well, and honestly, I don't know how much of it was the adrenaline in between contractions of just like something's happening and I'm excited. And how much, like, they were very intense right off the bat. I remember, I'd watched all the birth stories or all the birth videos, and I'd read all these birth stories, and I knew that this early labor could be a really, really long drawn out process, and like the intensity could kind of come and go. And so I made every effort to try to rest and try to go back to sleep. But when they would come on, they were really intense. And so I was like, let me just get in the bath. I love to be in the bath. I took baths my whole pregnancy. And so I was like, knew that was going to be something that I would want. And I was actually really surprised to find that I did not like being in the bath once my labor started. I couldn't get a good grip on anything. It was taking a long time for the tub to fill up, and I was really feeling it in my back. And so I was like, this is actually not working, which surprised me a lot.
Yeah, so every once in a while that happens. And it is very surprising, because I was like, but I've heard that that's what you do. Like, I've heard that that's the big coming in clutch help. Yeah. And if you don't like it, I've had moms that just can't feel grounded in the tub, and they didn't expect that.
Yeah. And I think that was sort of, I thought if I get in the tub, it's going to make me feel relaxed and sleepy, and then maybe I'll be able to rest. And it just made me feel like uncomfortable, and I couldn't get a good grip on anything. So I ended up actually getting in the shower and letting the water hit my back, and that felt amazing. So I just kind of like putzed around my room for about an hour and tried to get comfortable in bed, tried to get comfortable in the shower. And I ended up finally calling my husband upstairs. He was downstairs watching a show or a movie. So he had not gone to bed yet at this point. And he was in for a very long night, because by the time I got him, I was needing him, and he was not going to sleep. So he actually ended up pulling an all-nighter that night. This time around, I told him, you need to start going to bed when I go to bed, because if I go into labor in the middle of the night, like, you cannot pull an all-nighter when we have a toddler. But I labored by myself up in the room for about an hour, and then I called him to bring up my water and my birth ball. And, I needed him to kind of rub my back a little bit. But I was really surprised by how intense they were right off the bat. Like, I expected to be able to kind of like walk around our house and like, get my bag together and have this kind of early labor period. And I might have honestly had some of those easier contractions just while I was sleeping. But by the time they woke me up, they felt very intense to me. And I was feeling it really, really strongly in my back. Back labor was like the only thing that I was not prepared for. My like well-researched, like birth prep brain had not even considered the fact that I might have back labor, because baby was in like the perfect position the whole time I was pregnant. So I was like, back labor is for people whose babies are in a weird position. That was not necessarily the case.
Welcome to parenthood. Nothing's as they said it will be.
Yeah. Well, and also I felt a little bit jaded because I did think that like baby's in the right position, I'm not going to have any back labor. But babies change positions in birth. And so even if your baby is not in the perfect position your whole pregnancy, they might get in the perfect position right before you go into labor or as you're going into labor. And I just wasn't really prepared for that. I did not have a lot of tools in my toolkit for back labor. But that's what I was experiencing. So around 3:00, we called my doula and told her, like, hey, either I'm a real weenie or these are getting really intense and they're getting much closer together. And she lives really, really close to me, which was amazing. So she was able to come over right away and help me through some contractions. And around that like 3:00 point was when I definitely lost my mucus plug. There was no question about it. I also like had to vomit a couple of times. And that was when I knew like, okay, things are definitely happening. Like this is not going to just chill out and taper off at any point. So she came over at that point, and I had told her ahead of time, like one of the things that I had a lot of fear of was not laboring at home, was not laboring in the birth center. I was really nervous about laboring in the car. And she knew that. So I didn't want to go too early and stall, and I didn't want to go too late and have a baby in the car. And so she knew that it was really important to me to have her there to help us make the call of like, when is a good time to go and get in the car and go to the birth center. So I was very fortunate that she was able to be so close and come to our house and kind of help us make that call. And when she got there, my contractions had been really, really consistent up until that point. And I was starting to get like a lot of intensity. And she was like, well, let's time some. And all of a sudden I would have like a 30-second contraction next to a 2-minute contraction. And like the timing was all weird. And she was like, maybe baby's in a wonky spot. And so she sort of gently suggested doing a couple of contractions in like a sideline position. And I remember her kind of saying quietly behind me, like, but it can be brutal. And I'm here to tell you it absolutely was.
It's a great way to describe it. It can be brutal.
It's so normal. I feel like, especially when, like, as doulas, if we get somebody into one of those positions and it really sucks, that's almost like, okay, but we probably needed this. If it's sucking this much, it's probably because baby's doing some sort of something up in there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I absolutely think it was necessary, because after that point, they became much more regular again. But it was really weird to have her to be there, like have her arrive and be like, they've been so regular. They're really consistent. They're like 5 minutes apart. They're really intense for a solid minute. And then all of a sudden they were not consistent at all. And they were really intense. And I was needing a lot of help to get through them. And so, yeah, we did 3 contractions on both sides in a sideline position. And they were brutal. They were horrible. But whatever it was worked, because they became much more regular again. And very shortly after that, we got in the car to go to the birth center. And I will say, this is my only regret of my whole birth experience. And like, my doula is absolutely amazing. I adore her. This was not her fault at all. But I had asked her for some counter pressure because I was really, really feeling it in my back. And she was doing, I was asking for hip squeezes. And she was doing some counter pressure, like right by my tailbone. And it was helpful, but not offering the relief that I wanted. And so I was like, no, I want the hip squeezes. I want the hip squeezes. And she was kind of like, let's hold off. Like, that can be a whole lot of relief. And like, I don't want to pull that out of the toolkit too soon and then not have it for later on. And I wish I had insisted on the hip squeezes then, because after that point, there was never really an opportunity for me to experience them. And I, one, would have liked to experience them during birth, but I also think they would have helped. And I just didn't insist on it. Like I just, she said like, let's wait. And I didn't think anything of it. And afterwards I was like, man, I wish I had said like, no, I want the hip squeezes. Because we just didn't get around to needing them after that point. But so I would just say like, if you have an instinct that something might help, definitely like put your foot down. Because she didn't know what I was experiencing. She didn't know that I was having, intense back labor. Like, yeah, it might have been too soon for somebody, but my labor ended up being really quickly. And so we didn't get around to it. So like, I would just say, trust your instincts if you think something might help.
Yeah, that's tricky for sure. So that was kind of as you were getting ready to move on to the next location.
Yeah. So I got in the car. I will say, this is not advice to anyone. I did not sit in the passenger seat of the car with a legally buckled seatbelt. I was on all fours in the back of my husband's SUV. So
yeah, I always say, I'm like, if they pull you over, be like, you do this then. I go on knees, holding the back. So that's what I did, holding the back of the seat, like the headrest. That was my place.
Yeah. I was daring somebody to pull us over.
There's no way I would be able to sit on my booty at that point.
Luckily, this was in the middle of the night. The birth center was an 8-minute drive from our house. Like it was not that bad. And I remember my midwife had said to me, like my midwife and my doula had both mentioned this ahead of time because I had a lot of fear of laboring in the car. They were like, you're so close. Like this is probably going to be like 2 to 3 contractions in the car. And breaking it down rather than being like, we're going to be in the car for this long and we're going to have to move and transition. Having it just be, it's going to be three contractions in the car. Like, okay.
That's helpful.
I can do that.
I can do 3 contractions.
I can do 3 contractions. So we put some towels down. I didn't do anything. My doula and my husband were like all hands on deck, getting everything in the car. I was leaned over on all fours. I was holding on to the headrest of the seat in front of me. And we got to the birth center. I got out of the car and had a contraction while I was like getting out of the car. And I remember holding onto the doorknob of the birth center, like, I just need to sit here for a minute while my contraction goes away. Like, didn't even make it in the door. But when I got there, my midwife met us there, and I immediately asked for a cervical check. And I was very, I'm sorry, my cat is trying to scratch it.
Hey, you're good. I have 3 dogs in the room that we're in right now. That is just how we live our lives. I saw your little kitty the moment we started this. I was like, oh, look at him back there. I'm good.
So I was like very intentional about not wanting a lot of cervical exams. My midwife did not push them. I don't even know that she offered them. I came in asking for one because I was starting to feel kind of pushy. And I was so glad that I asked for one because I was at 7 centimeters. So part of me did sort of celebrate that little win that I had, gotten to that point from home. But also I was really grateful for that information because I was feeling pushy. And I mean, that was a new sensation for me. And if I had not known that I was 7 centimeters, I would have probably started to push. So that ended up being a really great tool that I was glad. I think that some people in the kind of crunchy health space would just say no cervical checks ever. And I actually think that there's a really great place for them. And having that insight as to where I was really helpful for me. But I got in the tub right away after that. She checked me and I was like, get me in the water. So
I know 7 centimeters knows I can get in there now.
Yeah. I was so ready. So I did like that. I mean, by the time we got there, she checked me and then I got in the water and then I did not get out of the tub again until after the baby was born. So there was no time for hip squeezes or counter pressure or anything else really. I was in the water and that's where I was going to stay. And by this point it was 5 a.m. and I was just exhausted. It was not necessarily that I loved being in the water during contractions. Again, I felt like I really couldn't get a grip on anything, but I was able to actually rest in between the contractions. in a way that I couldn't get comfortable anywhere else in the room, whether I was standing or walking or moving or swaying or laying on the bed. I just could not rest unless I was in the water. So that worked really well for me to be in the tub. And I was probably in there, like kind of laying, I was like in the water, but laying on my back for about an hour. And I remember asking the midwife, like, if you thought I should move positions, you would tell me, right? And she just like super gently goes, you're doing great and you're fine where you are. But if you want to get on all fours, that could just be a good change of pace. And so I did. I like leaned over, and my back labor was really intense. And in the tub, my back was out of the water when I was in all fours. And so I was like, that's not going to work. So they actually ended up opening the drain on the tub and then spraying my back with the water hose, like during contractions. And that was the only way that I was able to be sort of in that all fours position in the water, because my back was where I needed the most support. And the water was like not touching my back if I was in that position. So, so being on all fours like felt good because I could be gripping the side of the tub and I had some more stability, but I needed some support on my back. And I told them, and they immediately troubleshooted, which was great. I
think like a puzzle. We're always trying to solve that puzzle.
Yeah, I think if I could do it again, I would have just asked for a hot water bottle, which I don't know why. Probably because it was September, did not occur to me to pack my hot water bottle. But being able to put something like really, really warm on my back would have probably also helped. But at the time, like everything felt very primal. I was not thinking to ask for additional supplementation to what was going on. Like it didn't even occur to me. So the water was great. And I ended up I was starting to be able to feel his head coming in and coming out. And when his head came out, I had previously said, I want to try to catch my baby. Everybody was very supportive of that. But as soon as his head came out, I thought, there's no way. I was holding onto the side of the tub. I was in the water. Like I did not have a good grip on anything. I thought we're going to be fishing around in this tub for the baby if somebody leaves it up to me. So I shouted, like, somebody else needs to catch the baby. And they put my leg up into a lunge position. And I don't honestly even remember feeling him come out. Like it was so quick. I don't remember if there was a contraction or if it was just the position change, but he shot out of there. And my midwife grabbed him and put him on my chest before I had any idea what was happening. So it was so quick. As soon as his head came out, everything happened so much faster after that. And it was 6:50 and he was born. So I had started labor at like 11:30, 6:50. He was born the next morning. And it was much, much faster than I was anticipating, especially for my first. I think that I had mentally prepared for this, like, could be days long birth. And I hadn't really mentally prepared for a quick labor. So when it was done, it was this just whirlwind of like, what just happened?
How did you feel right afterward? Did you feel, because some people think, everyone thinks, a fast labor would be awesome. But sometimes it is so overwhelming and people have a little bit of a harder time coming back into their body sometimes. So what was your experience with that? Was it a little bit of shock or were you relieved?
I was definitely relieved. I think mostly just because I was tired. I love sleep. I really value rest. And so, I had gotten about 2 hours of sleep, but what felt to me like an all-nighter, just to be done with like the physical labor part felt so relieving. And I think like later on, once I processed it, it did feel like everything happened really intense, really quickly. And I had sort of expected to have that long early labor phase where I was able to just like walk around and, dance with my partner or, I had an episode of Ted Lasso picked out. And I said, when I go into early labor, we'll watch this episode because it makes me happy. It's my favorite one. It'll help kill some time. Like that is the attitude that I was going into labor with, was like, this is going to be hours long. So we're going to watch this episode of Ted Lasso and it'll make me happy. And then we'll do some other, like that was kind of the attitude I was going in. I did not expect it to be so intense and so primal. from the minute it woke me up.
That's fair.
Yeah. A whole different ball game for sure. You have to wrap your mind around it. Like we talked about all the tools of like, oh, this is what you can do when it does start getting intense, but you don't expect to have to use those straight from the get-go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and some people might, and maybe they would then struggle with like killing some of the time in early labor. You know, I remember somebody saying to me, when you start labor, go bake a cake because it'll take your mind off of things. And I mean, like I would have laughed in your face if somebody had told me to start baking a cake.
That's awesome.
I will also add that my mom showed up. So I had told my mom that she was like more than welcome to join us in labor. I have an awesome relationship with my mom. And so I know that that's not like the move for everybody. Some people don't want extra people in the room, but she showed up probably 20 minutes before he was born. And so she showed up at the most intense part, but she also showed up after a full night's sleep and she was well rested, and everybody else in the room, you know, I had woken them up in the middle of the night. And so everything was very quiet and serene. And my mom came in with all this like nervous energy of like, how's everybody doing? How are you? You know, and like came over and like wanted to hold my hand. And like, she just was kind of chatty. And my husband, who loves my mom so much, just goes, Susie, shut up. And he said, that's the only mean thing I think I've ever said to your mom. But it was just in the moment, she just came in with all this nervous energy. And it did not throw off my groove at all. It did not bother me one bit. But it was just funny. Like, I was just happy that she was there. And when she came in the room, the whole vibe changed. So it did not negatively impact me at all, but definitely be aware of who you're inviting into your birth space, because for some people that might really throw off their groove. Yeah. And I was super happy that she was able to be there and like see the birth and all of that. But we were all very quiet and very intense and tired. She was just happy to be there.
Yep. Sometimes that vibe change is so good, and sometimes that vibe change is not as helpful, we'll say.
Not what you need, yeah.
So how was like the immediate postpartum for you? How long did you stay at the birth center and all of that?
Yeah, we were not there for very long. So actually, I had 2 midwives that were with me for the birth. And then immediately after he was born, they both had to go to their other separate births. They had laboring mamas in different places. And so the third birth center midwife is the one who came in, took care of me postpartum. So that was amazing because I kind of got the best of all 3 worlds. Like I got all 3 of the midwives who I had been with prenatally. But I did have to have a couple of stitches. And I remember sitting in the bed, and Ciarra, my doula, had left, and they, told me like, we're going to do a couple of stitches. And I texted her and I said, I just had this baby naturally, and I am like more concerned about these 5 stitches that they want to give me than I was about like birthing an entire human. And she, was very reassuring and very kind. But that to me was like even worse, was having to get stitches done. And it was not that bad. It was much quicker than I thought it was going to be. But she had said, we're going to do we're going to do a couple of stitches and then let us like sleep for a couple of hours. My husband's like passed out next to me, and I'm sitting there staring at my brand newborn baby on this like birth high, and then also nervous about stitches. And I was like, again, people keep telling me I need to sleep, but it's not going to happen. Like there's no way, with all of the things that are going on in my brain right now, there's no way I'm going to be able to sleep. So I didn't, but I did get a couple of stitches. My bleeding was all normal. They were very sweet and supportive and gave us really good information. And then we were home by, I want to say like 1:30 or 2. So nice. We texted some family, like pictures of the baby. And they were like, what do you mean you're home? But honestly, once all of the medical stuff was cleared, we just wanted to be at home. So we did not linger. We knew we were going to rest better when we were in our own space. So the birth center was very comfortable. We were able to eat. My husband got a little nap. But ultimately, we just wanted to be home after it was over. So we were home pretty quickly.
Yeah. And you prepared so much for pregnancy. How was postpartum compared to what you thought it would be? And how was that for you?
I do think that I prepared decently well for postpartum. Like logistically, in terms of our house, I had done a really good job of filling our freezer full of meals. Our church set up a meal train for us, so that was really amazing. We had a lot of like family support in place, and just really supportive community. So in that regard, it was great. The healing definitely was harder and longer than I expected it to be. So I think I had this idea that if I do a natural vaginal birth, my healing will be really quick. But I had hemorrhoids and I had stitches, and I was like really uncomfortable for much longer than I expected it to be. So I think the other reason was that when I was breastfeeding, like when you're learning how to breastfeed, you need 8 hands. And that's why you have like all these pillows and, all this extra accoutrement to breastfeeding. And then once you've been doing it for a while, you just kind of like need an arm, and then you can cook dinner while you're breastfeeding. But at the beginning, it's very involved. And I was sitting up a lot when I was breastfeeding. And that was where I felt the most uncomfortable. So it was like when my baby needs me the most to feed him is when I feel the most uncomfortable. And that was a hard thing to juggle, was just like the healing along with trying to take care of this new person. And, the time that I felt like he needed me the most was when I was really hurting. So that was hard mentally. I think I was expecting it to be quicker and not quite as intense in the weeks after. But I will also say, like, I was so prepared to set boundaries and not let people in our house and just kind of turn people away and keep our space and our postpartum really private. And from day one, we honestly like loved having people in our home. And so we did a total 180 on that. Like every single day we would allow one set of visitors to come, and it just broke up the day for us. Like it made something in the day really exciting, and we got to share a birth story, and we had friends come. We did have people bring us meals, but for people who were not bringing us meals, we charged a price of admittance, and it was an iced coffee for mom and dad. It was like, we would love for you to come and hang out with us. We'll be in our living room, but like, you have to stop and get us coffee on the way. And people were so excited to do it. They were like, we would love to bring you coffee. So that was something that I didn't expect. I thought we would want nobody around and have it be this really kind of special, intimate thing. And I just would say, like, it's okay if you actually want your community around you. And we didn't have anybody that was super pushy about holding the baby if I needed to feed them. And, we just were really happy to have people come into our space and spend time with us and talk to us and make us laugh and share the birth story. And that ended up being really special for us as a family.
It is funny when what you anticipate flips on its head. And it's great that you were able to just go with it. And it's also okay if you're someone who thought you would want a bunch of visitors and you're like, no. Mm-hmm. All of those, it's totally okay to change your mind. So I love that you guys just gave each other space to do that.
Yeah. I think that that it can be really hard to ask for help or even just accept help in that time. But that was one thing that I'm really proud of my husband and I both for doing, is that when people would say like, hey, we want to come see the baby and bring in a meal, like, is there anything else that you need? We got really creative with ways to ask for help. And sometimes it was just, we're going to place a curbside order. Can you pick it up for us on your way? Or, actually, like, I mean, this was only for really, really close friends, but it was like, actually, the cat's litter box upstairs desperately needs to be taken out. And I'm not walking up and down the stairs right now, So we just got really comfortable with like asking people for help or accepting help when people were offering it. And I think that it is a really special time when your friends are postpartum. Like, let them help you, because that makes them feel closer to you and closer to your family, and is just a really sweet experience to have, other moms come in and like want to help you when they know what you're going through. So I think that was something that we did really well, was just accepting help when it was offered to us.
I love that. No, it is so important. And I think that's really hard to accept help because we want to try to be independent. We don't want to like ask too much of people, but especially when you're postpartum, like that's what the village is for. That's what your people are for. It's huge. I love it.
We also, I will say that we got a lactation consultant. We had lined one up before our son was born. And so we knew that it was going to be, it was just something that like we wanted to have in our pocket. We knew that it was going to be covered by insurance if we needed it, if we used it within a certain period of time. And so that was one thing that my doula had recommended, was like, have somebody that you're going to call ahead of time so that you're not having to research when you're in the thick of newborn life. And so we ended up going to a lactation consultant in Austin, which I live like way up north. So it was not close. And after our third or fourth appointment there, we found out that they do house calls. And I was like, why did nobody tell me this? Like, it's so worth the extra, I don't know, $20 to have them come to your home.
Absolutely.
But that's, again, something that, like, along with the birth class, I think that breastfeeding is a new skill and it's super natural, but it doesn't necessarily come naturally to everybody. And also, every baby is different. So your first, pregnancy might have not had any issues with feeding, but you've got a new partner this time, like the second time around. And so having an LC in your back pocket that you can call in those early days, I think is really important. And for us, like, nothing was wrong. We kind of went in thinking like, everything feels fine. Everything seems to be going well. We just want a second opinion. We want to know if there's anything that we're missing. And we still got tons out of the appointment. And so I think that is like, that was huge to be able to have professional support along the way while we were starting. Like, I knew that I wanted to breastfeed for as long as I possibly could. And so that was my way of setting myself up for success, was getting an expert's opinion like really early on and just making sure that we were on the right trajectory. And I think that everybody could benefit from an LC appointment, regardless of how you're planning to feed your baby. It's so helpful to just get, you don't even know what questions you might need to ask, and they'll have information for you that you didn't know you needed.
That's awesome. No, you're just like taking the words out of our mouths. Those are word for word what we say to our clients. So I love to hear it. Thank you so much for coming on. Would you like to share your social media or website? Because I know you are also a doula, for our listeners, for anyone who's interested in just connecting with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my Instagram is just Camry, CAMRY _Heckeroth, HECKEROTH. I don't have my website set up yet. That was something I was planning on doing this pregnancy, but we can talk about that next time around.
Yep, that's right.
Second pregnancy has been very different. But I am a doula in the Georgetown, sort of North Austin area. And I obviously am very passionate about birth center, and I'm doing a home birth this time around. But I just think that everybody can benefit from a doula regardless of where you want to deliver. And so if there's anybody in this area that's looking for somebody, I would love to be a support for you after I've had my own baby, hopefully very soon.
Yes, I love it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, by the time this episode comes out, you will have a baby in your arms. So
yeah,
be excited to hear what this one looks like. So we'll have you back.
Thank you. I'm super excited to see how different and similar they are in different ways. But I look forward to sharing again. Thank you all so much for having me on.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Birth, Baby. Thanks again to Longing for Orpheus for our music. You can look him up on Spotify. Remember to leave a review, share, and follow wherever you get your podcasts. See you next week.